I can maybe get this to work if someone will show me how it works. Does anybody know? Chuck?
Sure. Now we can fake it.
Is it on? Or, no, it's not making any difference. Okay. We should have done this earlier.
Here we go.
Is that it? Testing? No, that's not the button.
Hello?
No, I don't think that works.
How many men does it take to plug in a light bulb?
I think the batteries on these things.
Yeah, it could be.
Let's just let me yell. I'm going to try to yell. Will that work for everyone?
Yeah.
No. Okay.
Stand a little closer.
Do what? Well, they've got this camera set up. Unfortunately, well, some of you know that we've just redesigned our webpage, and despite my protest, they're wanting to put little YouTube videos of me on the webpage, and so this is our second effort to get it right technologically, and it looks like so far we're off to a bad start. And so I hope this isn't an omen for the rest of the day. I normally don't get to come to the gathering tables because of other responsibilities and because of the program being quite full and able to be conducted very well without me being here. However, the staff asked me if I would spend some time with you this morning on the subject of creating and keeping care partner connections. And I would like to start my remarks by reading you a story. It's a story of a care partner and the Second Family Care Team in Baytown at the Trinity Episcopal Church. Francine and Peter Catt met Jan Abbey and the members of the team in 1996. Peter was a retired Episcopal priest and Francine a retired librarian. Francine, who was 79, needed help to care for Peter, who was 80 at the time, following some hip surgery. Their two daughters lived out of state. Everyone anticipated the team would provide practical assistance for a short time until this lovely couple could be on their own again. No one imagined at the time that the story of their relationship would endure until 2009. As might be expected, the team provided many forms of support as age and physical decline rendered Peter and Francine progressively unable to tend to all of their daily needs. The team continually revised their support plan as one loss followed another, and they moved from the community to assisted living, to nursing home, and finally to hospice care. Though much changed for Peter and Francine over 13 years, there was one constant: Jan and the team. They were there to provide practical assistance when needed, but more importantly, they were there to make their final years more joyful. Peter died at age 94 in 2001. Francine died just days ago when I first wrote this story at the age of 92. But from 1996 until their respective deaths, the team and the Catts blessed each other in many ways, creating and sharing good times to cherish then and sweet memories to cherish now. When Jan describes the team's life with the Catts, she doesn't dwell on the losses. She tells heartwarming stories of how their lives became entangled. The team grew increasingly devoted to Peter and Francine. Peter and Francine returned the love and care they so generously received. The individual forms of assistance that the team provided were important, but the true significance of their shared journey is the deep relationships of mutual care that were forged. Jan tells how Peter enriched many lives, even as his slipped away. He had extensive interest in life experiences that he eagerly shared with others. For example, he traveled and learned about the world and the human family by being a cruise ship chaplain for 8 years. He spoke 8 languages. He loved telling children's stories and played piano for anyone who would listen. He had stories to tell, including dinner with President Kennedy in Houston the night before the assassination. After macular degeneration took his sight, he memorized poetry to recite and insisted that someone read his Bible, C.S. Lewis, and Newsweek to him weekly. Holidays and birthdays were shared in Jan's home without a second thought. And when Peter fell during the annual summer visit to Michigan, Jan flew there to drive them home to Baytown, with legally blind Peter giving her directions the whole way. These are some highlights of the team's life with Peter, but there were low moments too. Peter and Francine lived apart for some time due to his needs for care. Cancer and other problems mounted. During his last days, he had to be hospitalized, but Francine was ill with flu and could not go with him. Not to worry, Jan met the ambulance, rode with Peter, and then stayed at the hospital until Francine could be there. He was referred to hospice care. His last days of his life were like all of his days since 1996. They were shared with Francine, Jan, and the care team. Though Francine became a widow, she was not alone. Her relationship with the team grew even closer. Of course, the team helped her with tasks that were challenging for her to complete alone, but more importantly, they shared life with her. Errands, shopping, worship, tea, holidays, birthdays, hospital stays, and more for Francine were much better because the team was with her. She was a playful manipulator, complaining about not seeing them in order to see more of them. The setting for this love story changed when Hurricane Katrina threatened. Francine was evacuated to her daughter's home in Austin, where she remained until her death. Now, experiencing some dementia, she called Jan, telling her, "Call the police. I've been kidnapped. Save me." She did not return to Baytown, but her ties to the team remained strong. Twice weekly phone calls, quarterly visits in Austin, shared birthday celebrations, and other forms of contact kept everyone close. A broken hip, mild stroke, and then a fatal stroke ended Francine's life a few weeks ago. Francine and Peter received much care from the care team, but they gave as good as they got. Their gifts to Jan and the team were extensive and priceless. For example, Francine took Jan for lunch on her birthday. As Francine drove, steam spewed from under the hood to Jan's alarm. Francine was unfazed. Not to worry, it always does that. When Jan was in hospital and awoke after the first night, there sat Francine at 6 a.m. "I didn't want you to wake up alone." And prior to finalizing her move to Austin, Francine wanted Jan to have an inheritance, any possession that Jan would choose. Jan selected a crocheted bedspread. It is now a daily reminder of her surrogate mother and father, Francine and Peter, whose loving embrace is felt each time she wraps herself in it. And there is one more gift to treasure, a large print Bible from which Jan read at Francine's memorial service. Now, isn't that a lovely story? When we started the Care Team program many years ago now, we had a number of goals in mind, and those goals have expanded with the passage of time. And among the goals that we have now for the Care Team program are several. One is to provide a means for people of faith like you to fulfill your calling or duties to care for others. A second goal that we as an organization have is to assist congregations to create and conduct caregiving programs that serve people with needs that are not presently being met by other congregational activities. In other words, to fill in the gaps of care that may exist within a congregational's caregiving programs. And then thirdly, to create and sustain mutually caring relationships between team members and the people they serve. In your case, care partners and family caregivers. And through these relationships, experience many, many blessings. Now, our premise with respect to these outcomes emerge from the notion that the relationships that are formed are fundamental. And it's out of these relationships and the experiences that populate them that the blessings flow and that these goals are realized. Our experience in 25 years is that the more robust and intimate the relationships are, the more people are fulfilled, energized, joyful, and blessed by being part of the care team program. In short, the more of our lives we invest in the program, the greater the rewards seem to be. Now, the purpose of my remarks this morning are twofold. One is to talk to you about the importance of establishing and nurturing connections with your care partners and their caregivers. And then secondly, to suggest how these connections may develop and flourish within the setting of a gathering place and apart from it. Now, with respect to the gathering place with which you are very, very familiar, it seems to me that there are some strategies and tactics that you can utilize to to foster the development of the kinds of relationships that can lead to relationships similar to the one in the story of the cats that I read earlier. One is that you can make assignments intentionally with the view toward fostering a connection between specific team members, care partners, and caregivers. In other words, as you go about bringing people into the gathering place each day, and you assign a team member to be with that person over the course of the activities of the day, be more reflective and intentional about how you make those matches. Be attentive to the prospective chemistry of the two people. And if you discover that it's not a good match, switch. And the registration information that you get in advance may help you to identify who might be better matched with someone else, where the chemistry might be good, where there might be points of contact that can be built upon not only for that day, but in the future days. You might also help team members to develop skills to engage care partners and caregivers in meaningful, informative, and mutual sharing of facts and emotions, which help us to know the person and to discover shared interests or experiences that are the nuts and bolts of relationships. Now, my colleague Ron Sunderland, who co-founded Interfaith Care Partners with me, often talks about storytelling and the content of stories having two parts. One is facts, and the second is feelings. If we think about our own stories, there are a lot of biographical facts that some are public, others are private, about us, that say certain things about us. Where I went to school, for example, what degrees I held, what positions of employment I've held. These kinds of data are facts. And it tells you something about me, but it doesn't tell you all about me. The other parts of our lives are our feelings. How did I feel about going to seminary? How did that experience affect me? How did it alter my views? How did it help to shape my character? And how has all of my career since those days been influenced by that in the relationships that I've enjoyed, and how those relationships have contributed to my life, mostly positively, but sometimes negatively? How did I feel about the deaths of my mother and father, for example? That kind of information tells you similarly important, or gives you similarly important insight into who I am and what makes me tick. Where do I travel? What about those travels have I enjoyed and what have I not enjoyed? Why did I choose the places where I've gone? Incidentally, if you've never been to the Galapagos, let me encourage you to go. I just went not too long ago. But these are the sorts of things, these are the sorts of communications that can occur within a gathering place that helps us to get to know one another, to more fully know how this person came to be, who he or she is, the facts and the feelings of their lives. And the activities that you do at a gathering place can be means of connecting and bonding as you are together. When I was in seminary, there was a course that was offered by the professor's permission called Psychiatric Information for Clergy. And I don't know whether it was an effort to get those of us who were most at risk for mental problems into the course, or whether it was to equip us to deal with other people with mental problems, and it was actually the latter. But part of what we did in that course was to learn about mental illness and how mental illness affects the way people live and cope with life stresses. Part of it was to spend time on an inpatient unit in the psychiatric hospital where we interacted with the people who were being treated within the hospital setting at the time. And one of our tasks as students on the floor was to every so many hours go and take the vital signs of each of the people in the unit. Now, on the whole, these people were just as fit and healthy physically as I am. And the object of getting their vital signs seemed kind of moot. They didn't seem to be at any physical risk for something happening that would be life-threatening. And we were told that the purpose of going to take the vital signs wasn't so much to know what their heart rate was and their respiration rate was. It was more to have a reason to interact with them. And so the taking of the vital signs was a means to an end. And in the course of wrapping the cuff around them and pumping them up and doing all the things that one did, was an occasion to have conversation, to where we began to learn about them and their experience with mental illness. And I think it's a similar approach with many of the activities that you do with your care partners at a gathering place, that they have value in and of themselves, but they are also a means to another end, which can be foundational with respect to building and developing the kinds of relationships such as the cats with the care team at Trinity Episcopal Church in Baytown. Now, there may be other tactics or practices to connect with care partners during a gathering place, and you are more experienced about those than I am because you're there all the time. And during one of the roundtable sessions that is going to be facilitated by Chuck Fleming, he's going to talk with you about some of those very practical things that you might do to begin that process of getting to know better your care partners during the gathering place itself. And having said that, I want to suggest to you that from my perspective, it seems to me that there are certain limitations within the context of a gathering place with respect to building the kinds of rich relationships that we saw in the story of the cats. One is, it's a public event. And some people don't talk about some things in public that they might otherwise talk about in private. Secondly, there's a lot of potential for distractions. There's a lot going on. And so even staying focused on the discussion may be an additional challenge. And then you shift from one activity to another, and so the conversation gets interrupted as you change. And then there's a time gap between gathering place meetings, and that interferes with building on what has come before, because a month has passed, and not only do they forget, we forget. And then lastly, if a team member doesn't stay with the care partner throughout the whole gathering place, the turnover inhibits the process as well. Now, the once monthly connection at a gathering place seems to complicate and delay the process of creating and enjoying the sorts of relationships that really do enrich everyone's lives. Now, a team leader or a designated team member may contact the caregiver between meetings for a reminder or an invitation or just to touch base, but the extent of conversation may be restricted more to business. The next gathering place is on this date. Are you coming? And that may be all that takes place. There may not be much attention given to connecting, or, dare I say, caring. So, if the interim contact is not by the same person who is assigned to a care partner or to that family, there's an additional disconnect because that changes from month to month, to person to person. In this case, perhaps the assigned team member could assume responsibility for these contacts. If I'm assigned to you at the gathering place, then perhaps I should be the one to call and make sure that you've had some contact with me during the interim time, and that I'm looking forward to continuing our conversation at the gathering place the next time. Now, these conversations, I think, on the interim time could go beyond the business of when things are happening and are you coming, to include a discussion of what happened at the last gathering place with the caregiver or with the person for attending the gathering, or what was learned from the care partner at the last gathering place that was important to you. It begins to say that you are bonding and you're learning about and you're caring for this individual beyond just spending an activity time together. So connections can be made both with the family caregiver through these interim contacts, or even with the person with dementia who attends the gathering place. Now, I'd like to press this agenda a bit further to suggest that it seems to me that meaningful connections are more likely if the frequency and forms of contact are more than the monthly gathering place. Perhaps scheduled visits to a care partner's home by that person's care circle, the one or two people who are assigned to that individual to really create the bonds. That might hold more promise for creating and deepening relationships that produce meaningful rewards for everyone. Now, stretching the team in this way requires an extra commitment. That goes without saying. And that extra commitment would demonstrate even more the team's interest to more robustly care for your families, as well as to, and I don't mean this in any diminutive way, entertain a care partner and provide a period of respite for the family caregiver. Now, I think some of your team leaders and some of your team members really do, over the course of time, connect with the caregivers. And you connect with the person with dementia, your guest at the gathering place. But that's usually a smaller number of the team than there are people on the team. And if those more intense connections and relationships are meaningful to the team leaders and to those few people, why not open them up and encourage all of the team to have an opportunity at these rewarding experiences? Now, having said all that I've said, I don't intend to minimize the value for everyone of a gathering place. I'm suggesting that there are more blessings to be realized if an extra effort can be made. And there may be several ways to bridge the gap between the gathering place and a care partner's home, including recruiting new members specifically oriented, equipped, and dedicated to an in-home ministry. Now, all of you have daytime free. Well, not all your daytimes are free, but at least you have daytime available to participate in the gathering place. There may be other people in your congregation who have evenings or weekends free, who have a sense of call, if you will, for people with dementia and the families that are facing that particular struggle. And they're excluded from the care team at the gathering place, but they could be included in the care team seeing people in their homes. Now, I suspect that the type of connections and the fullness of relationships portrayed in my opening story are more likely if a plan and effort are made to achieve them. I just don't think they happen without some intentionality. We often refer to caregivers or a person's journey with dementia. Alzheimer's care team members are part of that journey, and you make immeasurable contributions along the way. You are part of a creative ministry that provides comfort, joy, and hope to people who are at risk for being isolated and overwhelmed as they live with one of life's misfortunes. The testimonies of caregivers and care partners that I hear and that you hear all the time reveal what your team means to them and the difference you make in their lives during a very stressful time. You are an important source of strength for the journey that helps them along the way. But in many instances, your companionship and support stops before the journey is over. then these families may be more alone and unsupported, just as their needs become more intense. There often comes a time when a care partner, for one reason or another, can no longer attend a gathering place. Does a team's connection with that family end at that time? Should it end? How can your care be prolonged? What potential exists for your connection during this post-gathering place part of the family's journey with dementia? This may be the time that you are most needed. What can be done at this time to preserve rather than sever the connection that has been a lifeline to these families? I'm implicitly issuing a challenge and a plea. And as I do that, I want to go back to the beginning of the Alzheimer's Care Team project. In talking about connections and the blessings that ensue from them, I have been implicitly issuing a challenge for teams to give greater attention to fostering and nurturing meaningful bonds that can make your service on a team joyful and your time with each other and care partner families something you cherish. How many Francine and Peter Katz are part of your gathering place? How well do you know your team or individual members know the families you serve? The project began in 1992 as an in-home respite and family support ministry. The gathering place format was a wonderful innovation by the team at Memorial Drive Presbyterian Church to overcome certain challenges they were experiencing. It has proved to be an effective methodology that has almost totally taken the place of an in-home presence. One cost of this evolution, in my opinion, is a lessening of connections and formation of rich relationships between team members and with care partner families. Endearing stories like the one I read seem less common these days. Now, I'm not being ungrateful or unappreciative of the good work you do, and I'm not issuing an either-or proposition. Rather, I'm inviting you to creatively think about how your team can have a both-and presence and connections. I need to be frank. There are costs in time and vulnerability to a story of relationships like the Katz. The extra time is obvious. The openness to hurt may or may not be similarly obvious. The more you connect, the more your story and the story of your care partner family entwines. The more susceptible you are to feel the losses that you experience together as a dementia progresses. But take comfort and be encouraged by the story of the Katz. We did not hear in that narrative a tale of sadness or regret. Rather, we heard a story of celebration and thanksgiving, a story of exchange of gifts, a story of wonderful memories and cherished experiences. If what I'm proposing has merit, how can these goals be realized? What practices will be successful? I am not omniscient. The source of all good things in the Care Team program is not solely interfaith care partners. The gathering place format is proof of that, an innovation at Memorial Drive Presbyterian Church Alzheimer's Care Team. Each team in the program is a laboratory for caregiving from which insights, skills, and practices emerge. All of us are students of caregiving, grounded in and an expression of our faith. I hope each Alzheimer's Care Team will respond to my reflections and challenge by developing your own strategies and methods to create and keep connections with your families and each other. Let's see what creative ideas and practices emerge. Let's share our experiences at a future gathering table and evaluate them. Let's discover what works and then encourage other teams to consider adopting these best practices because they add value to us as team members and enrich the care that we give to the families that we serve. What I am proposing may not be of interest to all teams. It may be beyond the capacity of some teams, but I believe some teams will be creative and adventurous enough to take up my challenge. Their laboratories will produce new, effective, and meaningful avenues for relationships that will reflect the joy and thanksgiving we heard in the story of the cats. In conclusion, I invite you to be innovators and teachers of caregiving. We need to learn from each other. You have a contribution to make that could transform and enrich the full care team program. This will be a stimulating and exciting adventure for us all if we will embark upon it. I look forward to learning from you and with you as we collectively strive to care more fully for the families we serve. How am I doing on time? Do I have any time left? Yes? No? We are not of one mind, obviously. We do? I don't.
So you can have the questions at your breakout session.
Okay.
since we're
All right.
doing
I'm
that.
done then. Thank you
That'd be
all.
fine.